All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So, today we're going to finish off the war in Europe. Okay, we're going to be talking about what happened, and basically, we're going to do a quick rundown of the war in Europe. Again, there's so many battles and so many things that happen. Um, we're just gonna kind of skip all over those and get to the end of the war in Europe. So that means the end of Hitler. Okay. Now, when I say the end of Hitler, that means the end of Hitler. It doesn't mean the end of the war, because we still got Japan we got to talk about. Okay. So that's what we're talking about. Let's go ahead and get started. So here is your warm up picture. My question to you is this: what do you think this artist is trying to say about the Nazis' control not only of Europe but the Atlantic? Because remember, they controlled the Atlantic with their U-boats and things like that, sinking ships left and right. But now that the U.S. is involved, and they have battleships and things like that, and Britain's now back on track building ships and things like that. Um, what do you think this artist is trying to say about the Nazis' control? Now, if you don't really understand, look at the flag, the Nazi flag. Does it look brand new? How can you tell? There's certain things that you tell if you see a flag flying. Sometimes you can look at it and going, "Wow, that's not new," or it's different variations. You could just tell. So, what do you think this artist is trying to say about the control of Europe and the Atlantic? Okay, so think about it. Write your response because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right, so November 18th, 1943, the Battle of Berlin begins. Okay, the German capital is basically bombarded constantly from November 18th, 1943 to March 24th, 1944. Now, why do the Allies do this? Basically, in a sense, because they could. Because again, the Nazis bombed France. They bombed the heck out of uh, Britain and other countries that basically stood in their way. So this is kind of a way for the Allies to kind of, stick their thumb in the Germans' eyes and be like, you know what, we can get you now. You think you're all big and bad and things like that. Well, we can get you. Just know that. So June 6th, 1944, which is known as D-Day, is a day, an event that a lot of people remember, they know about because of movies and video games, but they don't know everything about it because there's a lot of stuff that people, the movies and video games don't talk about, don't share. Um, so, a great example is this: the initial attack didn't start in the with the beaches, with the boats coming to the beaches. It actually started right after midnight. 24,000 paratroopers. I mean, guys with the parachutes jumping off planes, landed behind the beaches. They landed like some like forest area. And so the Nazis saw them fly over in 1,000 planes, right? And they were like, well, we need to get them. Those Nazis who were at the beach, they were not going to just stay there and be like, well, those guys are behind us. I'm sure somebody will get them. No, they were like, we got to get those guys. So they went to them. So they left very few people at the beach. And this is where the Allies stormed the beach. At 6:30 in the morning, the land invasion begins. A total of 176,000 men crossed the English Channel in 5,300 different boats, and they basically land on a bunch of beaches, 45 miles, stretch of land. Okay. Excuse me. The operation is known as Overlord. Okay, but everyone knows it as D-Day. Okay, but that was the operation name, Overlord. Each country had a section they would take. The American troops had Utah and Omaha. Omaha is the most famous one. A lot of movies and video games based off Omaha. Um, British landed on Golden Sword, and believe it or not, even the Canadians, yes, the good old nice Canadians up north above us, oh, that's so nice, eh? Those guys took the section called Juno. They were in on D-Day. Now, for the Americans, this is the bloodiest battle in U.S. history since the Battle of Antietam in the Civil War. And for you guys here in world history, next year you'll be learning about that battle when you talk about the Civil War. Uh, Now, the thing is, the Germans are fighting them off. They're on the beach. They have the machine guns, and they're just, just shooting at the Allies. But there were so many people storming the beaches, they basically overran them. And those Germans who left the beach, some of them ran into those paratroopers. Remember, the beach is right here. Those paratroopers are out here. So when they left the beach, some of them ran into those guys and were either captured or killed. Now, remember I told you about Stalingrad. Hitler lost in Stalingrad, his first real true public loss. So now he's like, okay, we lost in Russia. The Americans and the British are attacking France. We need to push them out. So he's taking all his soldiers in Russia and leaving a skeleton crew and having all those soldiers, a lot of them, come to England or sorry, to France to try to fight off the the Americans and British. Now, here's another thing too, which is a big like can I say misconception, is that every German people loved Hitler. They were loyal to him. No, not every single person loved and adored Hitler who was a German. Um, yes, although a lot of people who hated Hitler kept it a secret, because they knew other people, or actually they didn't know if everyone else loved and were loyal to Hitler. So they kind of had to, test the waters every so often, see, oh, this friend of mine, he agrees with me that Hitler's ruining our country. So they might say something like, I don't know about this thing he's doing, and some people might be like, oh, how dare you say that? No, he's right. They'd be like, oh yeah, you know what, you're right. Because again, if you were seen disagreeing with Hitler's decisions, you were seen as a traitor. Not loyal to the country. And there were some military leaders, top guys, who felt Hitler is destroying this country, and they basically decided we need to get rid of him. Excuse me. Now, there were at least 42 attempts to kill Hitler that we know of. Okay, car bombing and poisoning food and just straight shooting at him, things like that. You know, uh, they didn't work. Okay, and that's just the ones that were attempted. Who knows how many different plans there were that people thought of, but they just didn't do it. Okay, but there were 42 that were tried. The closest one was known as the July Plot because it happened on July 20th. It's also known as Operation Valkyrie. Basically, these top military leaders, generals, and things like that, they basically wanted to get rid of Hitler. And once they killed him, and the other people like Goebbels and things like that, um, what they would then do is basically take over the military, and that's called a coup when the military takes over a country, and then they would contact the allies and try to make peace with them because they knew a lot of citizens are going to die, a lot of soldiers are going to die if we continue with Hitler's uh, control, his reign. So the attempt was to blow him up in the Wolf's Lair. Now here's the thing though. In the Wolf's Lairs, there's two major buildings where they had meetings. One was made of concrete, And if the bomb had exploded in there, it would have killed everyone inside because of that pressure and things like that. And, more likely the whole building collapsing. And again, concrete, that's a lot of weight just crushing down. Um, the other thing was the building was a wood building. And that on that day, the meeting was held in the wood building. So when the bomb exploded, um, Colonel Stauffenberg, who basically started the bomb, he figured Hitler's dead. He has to be dead. The bomb was right there. He should be dead. And him and the other generals tried to take over, but word soon spread that, and it was proven that Hitler was still alive. And all these guys were rounded up. Uh, General Beck, General Ulbricht, General von Tresckow, and Colonel Stauffenberg were all rounded up, lined up, and then executed. Okay. And again, that's the closest they ever got to killing Hitler. Now, August 15th, the American and French forces take over southern France, and now Hitler's like, okay, we're losing over here now. So he tells his soldiers, come back to Germany. The Allies basically trap 80,000 guys, 80,000 Germans, and they're trying to go back to Germany. So what the Allies do, they start dropping bombs on their path, just dropping bombs. These crazy Germans run through the bombs. You know, they run through the bombs trying to make it out. Um, that's nuts. Because the thing is, about 10,000 of them die. You know, so yeah, so they kind of figured it's best to rather die than be taken as a prisoner of war. Now we're gonna skip a bunch of battles, and we're gonna get to the Battle of the Bulge. This is the last major push back against the Allies. That Hitler was like, no, 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 we need to stop backing up, and we need to punch back. His hope was if the Germans push back, then they would get momentum, and then they would fight harder, and they'd be like, look at, we're pushing the Allies back. If we just give a little bit more, we can, keep going and things like that. So that's what they did. They gathered up all their strength, what they could get, which was basically 20 infantry divisions, so about quarter of a million soldiers. They moved along a 50-mile stretch of land. So if you look at that map, that solid purple line, that's where the line um, was. Okay. Then they pushed back. And remember, they had about 600 tanks and about the same amount of planes, like 600 planes. Excuse me. And they actually pushed the Allies back. So Hitler's plan was kind of working for a second. And if you look at the map, the dashed purple line is where they pushed, and the farthest they ever got was a dotted purple line. That's as far as they got. But the thing is, they surrounded American soldiers, and they actually captured uh, about 10,000 of them. Um, the famous quote was the German officer basically told the American commander of those men, "We have you surrounded. We know you're out of ammunition. We cut you off from supply lines." And he's going on, telling them all the stuff that the Germans have on them, and basically says, "Now, what do you say to that?" And the American commander just says, "Nuts." That's it. So that was like the famous quote, like from the Battle of the Bulge, from one of our captured group. So the Germans did capture about 10,000 of our men, but we fought back. The Allies pushed the Germans back. So basically, all the land, the territory that the Germans took, the Allies got it back. January 30th, 1945, all the land. So the line went back to that solid purple line. it went back to that. Um, in all, when it was all over, the Battle of Bulge was over, 19,000 soldiers, U.S. soldiers, were killed. 60,000 were wounded, captured, or missing. But the Germans took a harder hit. 100,000 men were lost. And basically all of their tanks and planes, all 600 tanks, almost all 600 planes were gone, destroyed. And on April 25th, the Americans are marching, right, uh, uh, at Targo, and all of a sudden they see some other soldiers coming this other way. And they're like, who the heck is that? So they look, and it's the Russians. The Americans and the Russians actually meet up, and they're like, you and I are on the same side, huh? Yeah, yeah, okay, cool. Um, so don't worry about behind us because we took care of that. And the Russians like, yeah, 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 we did the same thing. We took care of everything back there. And they're like, you guys want to go that way? Yeah, let's go. So we basically cut Germany in half. The Americans took half, and the Russians took half. And the next day, the Russians entered Berlin. Now, on April 30th, the Russians reached Reichstag, which is the heart of the German power. Hitler did not, um, basically, after Berlin was being bombed, was like, no, we're not going to put um, all our power, all the government stuff in Berlin, but rather Reichstag. And later in that afternoon, on April 30th, um, the Russians are about half a mile away from Hitler's bunker, and Hitler realizes this is the end. So he appoints Admiral Karl Donitz as the head of state and Joseph Goebbels as the Chancellor of Germany. Now, right before that, he gets married to his wife, well, his longtime girlfriend, Eva Braun. They get married, and then basically she drinks poison. They give a poison to their dogs, and then Hitler shoots himself. Now, the soldiers were given an order that once they heard the gunshot, they were to go into the room and take Hitler's body and burn it. And that's what they do. They take his body outside into this garden area right outside the bunker and they burn it. And the Russians, maybe half hour later, 20 minutes later, come through, go right past the body, and go into the bunker to see uh, what was happening down there. Now, that was on April 30th. Once news came out that Hitler shot himself and he's dead, some of the Germans were like, we're going to still fight. We're going to fight. That lasted for about a week because Germany surrendered on May 7th, 1944. Excuse me. And Victory Day, VE Day, is declared in Europe. You know, the Nazis are done with. Okay. But now comes Japan. So, November 22nd to the 26th, the Allies have a conference again, but this time in Cairo, Egypt. And they basically agree. The only type of surrender they'll take from Japan is an unconditional surrender. Basically, lay down your weapons, be taken as prisoners, and no more fighting. The Japanese are not going to take that very likely. All right, so here's my question to you. Why do you think Hitler ordered his men to burn his body? What are some possible reasons for this? Why would he tell his men, burn my body? What do you think? So use your imagination. Again, think about what the Nazis, the Russian relationship was. Heck, any relationship between the Nazis and any country. Think about that. Um, okay, so why do you think he would want his people to burn the bodies? So once you answer this question, you're done with this lesson. Okay, So, with that being said, you guys, I hope you have a great day. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Okay. With that being said, you take care, be safe, and I'll see you guys later. Okay.